Hello everyone, my name is Ulan and Dewi and my last student number is 014. So, in this opportunity, I would like to introduce to you all about my assignment in postmodernism and postcolonialism. So, my presentation is entitled Postcolonialism Perspectives in the Hybrid Cuisine in My Surroundings. Okay, so first of all, I would like to give you the brief explanation about what the postcolonialism is. So, postcolonialism is the study of the colonialism's effects on culture, societies, and the power dynamics between the colonized and the colonizing nations. So, this is such an interdisciplinary field that rooted in the cultural and literary studies. And according to Edward Said theory in his Orientalism, so he stated that postcolonialism is such a debate between the East as the colonized nation and the West as the colonizing nation. So it tries to analyze the after effects of the colonization from the West nation to the East nation as the colonized, as being the colonized. So it is also trying to reconsidering the identity of the East nation, which is the Oriental nations, by removing the misconceptions of the Oriental nation as the inferior or the weak nation because they had been colonized by the West nation as a superpower, as the superior, as the as the full of power nation, rather than the East nation as being colonized by the West nation. So actually, as we can see nowadays, the colonization doesn't stop until nowadays. Just because Indonesia has been free from the Dutch nation who had colonized our nation for many years ago, and maybe from Japan, we are not free as the United Nation. Why? Because the colonization has been continued until nowadays. As we can see that it can be depicted on the effects of the culture in our country. For example, like it is kind of the hybridity by integrating our culture with the colonizing nation culture. Like for example, I have found that ramen as the Japanese food is nowadays had been grown so well in our country in Indonesia. So this is such the effects of the postcolonialism and the concept of hybridity, which is hybridity is the theory that refers to the attempt to create the new cultural form because of the contact between the colonized and the colonizing people. And I think this connection or this contact between the colonized people and the colonizing people is the result of the globalization effect, which is nowadays the technological development has been grown up so fast, has been developed so well in our society, and that's why this hybridity it can grow very well in our society. So as the effects or as the result of this hybridity can be seen from the ramen food in my surrounding, that nowadays it has been developed in many flavors. So it's not only in the flavor of the origin nation, which is Japan, but also it is the mixing of the Indonesian flavor with the Japanese flavor. So I think this is very interesting to be discussed in this discussion, and I know that this is such a crucial issue that we need to discuss about because it refers to our Indonesia country, our national identity that we need to maintain, that we need to sustain in order to be, to be superior rather than who we were, who our Indonesian state in the past time. So because of that, I will give you the explanation about how important it is to maintain our national identity through the postcolonialism perspectives towards the hybrid cuisine, which in this presentation I choose the cuisine of ramen, which is from Japan, because the development of times, ramen has the flavor not only from Japanese flavor, but it is also try to integrate it with the Indonesian flavor, such as as we know that the origin ramen is using the miso broth or something like that. But as the development of time as the development of culture, it has been developed with the Indonesian flavor, which is using the coconut sauce, or we can call it as santan, to this ramen cuisine. So why this flavor variants of ramen happened in Indonesia? This is because the post-colonialism effects, which is the variant flavors of ramen, is proposed to be able to be loved by the Indonesian people. Why? Because if ramen just using their origin flavor from Japan, which is it has the tasteless flavor that of course it is loved by the Japanese people, but in Indonesia, which Indonesian people are dominated with the strong flavor in their rempah-rempah or in their ingredients of the food of the cuisine in Indonesia. So it has changed the strategy of this post-colonialism effects in order to change or to integrate the taste or the flavor of this ramen cuisine. But how to make their origin culture or their origin cuisine is not getting lost in Indonesia, but they can integrate it with the taste flavor that is being loved by Indonesian people. That is why the use of santan or coconut milk sauce in the ingredients of ramen is used in ramen restaurant in Indonesia. It is because the owner of this ramen restaurant commercialization, or yes, it is in order to engage, to to catch the interest of Indonesian people in order to buy their foods, to increase their profit. So this is such the strategy in terms of economical way, but also this can be seen through the post-colonialism perspectives. And then the development of the ramen flavor variants in Indonesia. In every ramen restaurant, has the purpose, or it aims to increase the profit, in which with their strategy to you know to give the novelty of the ramen flavor variants, which is integrated with Indonesian flavor, it would be easily accepted by the Indonesian people, of course, by from the children until the old generation, that they can taste, oh, this food or this cuisine is very delicious. This, oh, the taste is different, and this ramen cuisine is very worth to try for, by especially by the young generation or Gen Z, that nowadays they are very easy to be influenced by the new things, such as, yes, of course, such as the development of ramen cuisine in Indonesia. And for example, like this flavor variants of ramen, as we can see, ramen with spicy chicken, coconut sauce, ramen with sambal matah, and then ramen with kuah soto, and yeah, etc. All of that is kind of the post-colonialism effects in Indonesia that has been accessed until nowadays. So I think this development of the ramen flavor variants that is integrated with the Indonesian flavor variants, which is this also the result of the post-colonialism in terms of hybridity, which has resulted on the new culture, or in this context, it has resulted on the new cuisine in Indonesia. Beside of this issue, or beside of this case, that we need to gain our critical understanding toward this phenomenon in Indonesia, it also realized me to bring the critical thinking towards these cases on ramen cuisine that exists in Indonesia for many years ago, of course, in which it's integrating to the Indonesian flavor has been developed the question about how about the Indonesian taste or the Indonesian culture identity, in which the existence of the Japanese culture in Indonesia, which is represented in ramen cuisine as the hybrid cuisine in Indonesia, it has been impacted the existence of the natural or the authenticity of the Indonesian culture, which, as we can see, that because of this hybridity cuisine, Indonesian culture is being inferior rather than the Japanese culture. And this is related to the hybridity theory by Homike Baba, which he stated that it is such a flux of culture. Hybridity is such a flux of culture. Why? Because culture is known as an entity of the mixedness of culture, as the sense of culture that is being in a continuous flux, and it is being in a state where new elements continuously gets added to it and keeps changing the identity. So I think this is what happens to our culture in Indonesia, that because of hybridity moves or transforms in a fluid elements, so it affects the existence of our Indonesian culture, which means that we only explore or we only expose the existence of this Japanese culture, which is ramen cuisine, while our Indonesian culture, or as being integrated to ramen cuisine, it's not being easily exposed and perceived by Indonesian people themselves. And it is also caused by the cultural hybridity, as it is such a non-essentialist notion. Because, in other words, in this framework of understanding culture, there is no notion of the universal culture, which is Indonesian, and then the Japanese culture. In these terms, culture is regarded as both spatially and temporally fluid, and it is such the hybridity which is known as cultural landscape or the cultural perspectives as a site of constant intertwining of new and disparate elements. So I think this is the impact of the postcolonialism in Indonesia, which is it's very dangerous if we as an Indonesian cannot perceive it, cannot understanding this case in a critical way. I think it's easy for us to just eat ramen or maybe um, other cuisines from abroad that we. So I think this is such the impact of the post-colonialism in our country, because if it is related to hybridity between Indonesian cuisine and ramen cuisine, which these both cuisine are integrated each other, and because of the hybridity character is fluid, so it can be interchangeable or intermixing very fluid, and the existence of the original culture or the original authenticity is not being detected easily. And because of that, it also threatened our Indonesian culture or our Indonesian authenticity, because of the new development of ramen flavor variants, because of that, the Indonesian original flavor is not being superior in its context, in its terms, in its field. But vice versa, it's being inferior because it's being integrated with the Japanese cuisine, which is ramen in this context. So I think this is such a silent colonialism that is developed in Indonesia, which is we are not easily realize it for the first glance, but as time goes by, we can realize that this is such a colonialism that the other culture want to colonize our own culture, our original culture. And I think this is being our task together in order to growing our awareness, our critical thinking, and our critical understanding towards the development of new culture in Indonesia that is reflected on a hybrid cuisine, which is in this context, it is reflected into the Japanese cuisine, which is ramen. And yeah, I think the post-colonialism perspectives towards hybrid cuisine in this discussion is being important to be discussed in the future because it also impacts to our own culture, which is Indonesia. And just because the new culture um, is more sophisticated than our own culture, it doesn't mean that our own culture or our Indonesian authenticity is being inferior. No, but it's our task together to be able to develop our authenticity, our culture, which in this context we need to save our cuisine, our Indonesian cuisine. And I think as a young generation, we need to explore many things. We need to explore our ability in order to look these cases in a critical understanding. And yeah, I think that's all from me for this presentation about the post-colonialism perspectives toward hybrid cuisine, which I choose the ramen cuisine from the Japanese culture, which is the result of the hybridity between Indonesian cuisine and Japanese cuisine, which it makes me realize to actually being more aware with this case in my surrounding, which it has been developed so well in my surrounding, which is as the young generation I also love this food, but at at the same time I need to aware of my own culture identity, which is being threatened by other culture. And yeah, from that I think we need to aware of this case in the future for our Indonesian culture authenticity being saved by the young generation. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.